Your blessings. Welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in Joshua chapters 9, 10, and 11. And today in chapter 9, we see this treaty. And it's just, man, this is a really cool story. And even though in some Bibles they're called the Gibeonites, and in some versions they're called the Hivites, whatever you want to call them. But the Hivites lived in Gibeon, so some people called them the Gibeonites. So it's easy to get confused, and if you study a lot of this about the tribes that are in Canaan that the Israelites take over, this could be confusing. So I want to clear that up. But this group of people knew who God was. They feared God, and they recognized him as being this awesome God who was able to take over and win battles. So they decide, hey, we don't want to fight this God or his people, so let's go make a treaty with his people. And they tricked Israel into a treaty that Israel was not supposed to get involved with. But they did it in such a way, it was so clever that you kind of have to kudos to those guys. But anyway, so chapter 9, just this real cool story of how they came about with this treaty. And then a lot of the other countries think they're traitors, so they attack them, and Israel has to come to their defense. But we see in these 3 chapters Israel just constantly winning, win. That's all they do is win battles, with the exception of that first one with Ai after Jericho, but that's a different story. There was sin in the camp, but they're just constantly winning. And it's not because Israel had this incredible army, even though as they went along, they obviously got more experience. They would be able to take weapons from their enemies after the battles were fought. So they were building up their strength, their experience, and they were becoming a great army. But that's not why they won any of these battles. They won this battle because God gave them the land and told them to go in and conquer it. And it was God who would go before them and win these battles. But there is something to be said for the obedience of Joshua and the Israelites during this time. And in Joshua chapter 11, verse 9, it's Joshua did to them as the Lord had told him. One short little verse, but the fact that Joshua did to them as the Lord told them, I don't want to say it's a very rare instance, but in a lot of times we don't see Israel being very obedient. We see them being rebellious time after time after time. So it's good to see the Israelites doing what God told them to do. Verse 12, Joshua captures all the cities and all the kings, and it gives this long list of who they'd taken and who they'd struck down with the sword as God had told them. And then as chapter 11 comes to a close, we see verses 21 and 22. And it says, the Israelites destroyed the Anakim. Now, Anakim, if you remember, when the Israelites first went to the land and Moses sent in the spies to spy out the land, they came back and gave a report, except for Caleb and Joshua. The others gave a report that, man, we look like grasshoppers in their eyes. These guys are giants and we're scared to death of them. And God got angry because they didn't trust him, and he made them wander in the desert for 40 years. I think it is very fitting that we end this read with the very people that caused Israel to miss out on that blessing for 40 years. That was a huge sin. Here we see the Israel going in, and I mean, it's just like one quick sentence. It's like these guys that they were so afraid of that kept them out of the promised land for 40 years. One sentence, the Israelites destroyed the Amalekite. Bam. I mean, if they had trusted God to begin with, I'm sure it would have been this easy, but God's got a plan. Make no mistake about it. Just such a cool read today. Tomorrow it's going to be the exact same. It's going to be a really cool read with lots of good stories. We're going to be in Joshua chapters 12, 13, and 14. So, man, read up on that, and then let's come back here tomorrow and talk about the law enforcement takeaways. Until then, y'all be safe.